This episode of Reality Escape Pod is brought to you by Morty, Cogs by Clockwork Dog, Buzzshot, and Patreon supporters like you. Hey, escape room owners! Are you sick of trying to figure out the marketing puzzle? Buzzshot's got you covered. It's an all-in-one solution for powering business growth and improving the customer experience. They offer a ton of pre- and post-game features, including waiver management, creating incredible branded team photos, and streamlined review management for Yelp, TripAdvisor, Google Reviews, Facebook Reviews, and they offer integrations with Cogs and Morty.
One of the key features about Buzzshot doesn't even seem like a feature at all, and that is reliability. Their uptime is phenomenal, and they are easy to work with. We've said this before, and we'll say it again. The reliability of Buzzshot is a core feature of why you can feel confident when you build parts of your business on top of their software.
And I'll tell you that the reliability is even more important when you're operating multiple locations. Buzzshot just introduced a new feature called account switching, which lets you quickly switch between the different locations and multiple Buzzshot accounts, so you can make your workflow that much easier. Streamline your marketing and grow your escape room business. REPOD listeners get an extended free trial and 20% off your first 3 months with no setup fees or hidden charges. Visit buzzshot.com/REPOD. That's REPOD to learn more.
Welcome to the Reality Escape Pod, your lifeline when you need a getaway from the real world. I'm David Spira, alongside my co-host, PG Law. Together, we're exploring immersive gaming from all angles, and we'll be joined by guests who really know their stuff. Today's guest is Sera Dodd. She is one of the most experienced escape room players in the world, a consulting game designer, and a fellow member of the Board of Advisors for the Top Escape Room Project, or TERPECA. Welcome, Sera.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sera, we've known each other a long time. I want to start with your escape room player career. I'm not 100% sure when you came into the escape room scene, but I have this memory of you and your partner, Sharan, showing up essentially out of nowhere and going from people that I hadn't heard of at all to suddenly being the most experienced players in the Western world at the time. What's the story here? How did you end up finding and kind of attacking the escape room world?
I want to say it was about 8 years ago. I had just kickstarted the Crystal Maze in the UK, and I'd just begun to realize that immersive entertainment was a thing. And I kickstarted a ticket to allow me to bring 31 and me, friends and family, to the Crystal Maze. And it was a fun experience, particularly nostalgic for anyone from the UK.
For those who are unfamiliar, the Crystal Maze is an old TV show that ran in the UK and had sort of an escape room format well before escape rooms. And there is a live Crystal Maze game in London that you can book and play now.
Perfect, exactly. One of my friends who I knew from days when I worked on computer games turned up and said, "Sera, have you tried escape rooms?" And I said, "No, what are they?" And he said, "You get locked in a room and you've got a finite amount of time to escape." And I replied, "That sounds awful because I'm profoundly claustrophobic. I don't really like time pressure. I don't like anything that I might perceive as scary or tense. So this isn't for me." And then about a month or two later, I was looking for something to do on my birthday, and I asked Sharan if she'd found anything interesting or had anything planned, and she said, "No, not till the evening." And I remembered him talking about escape rooms, and at the same time, I think an advert had appeared online somewhere. And so I looked a little bit more into what this strange phenomenon was. And because it was my birthday, 20th of May, if anyone wants to send birthday cards, I thought, okay, why not? We'll play an escape room, and then I can prove that it's a dreadful idea, never do one of those again. And our first escape room was The Killer, ironically, given how much, particularly at the time, I was averse to horror. And it was delightful and exciting. And But I suppose all of those things that people really enjoy about escape rooms. I felt like I had agency in a story where we were the protagonists, or at least characters involved in the narrative. And we were using our puzzling ability and analytical skills to push the story forward and get to its conclusion. And I was in awe of this new type of media that I'd never experienced. I have always been a big gamer, whether it be board games or computer games. And for me, this felt like the next obvious iteration. We had a fantastic time, and I immediately opened my phone and went onto Google and said, Sharan, you know it's my birthday. I'm allowed to do whatever I like. That's the rule. So I booked another escape room. So on the first day I played an escape room, I played 2 escape rooms, which I think is what one might call a slippery slope. And the rest, I think, is history.
Yep.
I'm glad that it overcame everything that you thought you hated about escape rooms.
I think it's the misconceptions a lot of people have. I try and allay people's fears when they express the same concerns and say, consider escape room a little bit more like escapism room. The nomenclature that's stuck is sometimes problematic for people because of the assumptions they make about what that will mean, that it's about escaping and therefore it's always tense or claustrophobic or stressful.
I hear that a lot, is I'm claustrophobic and I'm afraid of getting locked in. So how did you get over that when you first walked into an escape room?
Well, the first escape rooms we played were full-size rooms, like an office room or a bedroom-sized space. I still won't get in a lift. I think you call those elevators, right?
Yeah, speaking American over here.
Right, in an elevator. I used to work in a hospital, and I worked on the 12th floor in this hospital, and every day I would walk up 12 flights of stairs to get to my ward. And sometimes I carried the crash bleep, and that meant that if someone was having a serious medical emergency on the ground floor, I would go up and down the stairs 7 times a day. I very occasionally get in them, but I still immediately am on the edge of a panic attack when I get in a lift. So those rooms that put us in very tight spaces where you go into a cupboard or cryogenic tube or coffin, those I still struggle with. I am thankfully not so claustrophobic. If I'm in a room that's of a decent size, I don't feel claustrophobic in there, as long as the room isn't permanently locked. In smaller spaces, as long as I can see an emergency button, I can hold myself in a calm enough space. Once I'm puzzling, that distracts me. So it's not too bad. If at any point I'm waiting for a teammate to give me some information, the anxiety starts to rise, and I will normally look over and there's the panic button, there's the emergency button. You can leave at any point. If you press that button, it will open immediately, and that helps temper the rising concern. So yeah, but it's also helped in some respects. Having to learn methods to help with the anxiety that claustrophobia brings about has also, I can use those methods in other parts of my life. And the same with horror games. I used to not be able to go anywhere near a horror game, and now I can. It's taught me a lot about myself, about what my sensitivities are, what my triggers are for stress responses. And some of the tactics that I've learnt in escape rooms, I've applied to other parts of my life that have helped me with anxiety, stress, tension. So it's worked both ways.
Let's talk about your horror arc. Because when I first met you, you hated horror games, really hated horror games. But over the time that I have known you, you have grown to become at first tolerant of horror games, and then an enjoyer, and now I would say maybe even an advocate for horror games, which is also a similar journey that my wife Lisa has been on. I'm curious to hear about what that journey was for you, your process of embracing horror.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've never sought out scary experiences in other aspects of my life either. So I would always shy away from watching a horror movie as anything that I might perceive as a scary movie, or anything that I find particularly uncomfortable, dark, macabre, occult. And I'm not really sure why, other than I'm probably, like other people, prone to a level of stress and anxiety and discomfort. And I know some people thrive off that kind of anticipatory discomfort of horror and what might come next. For me, that puts me in a kind of an uncomfortable place that I don't enjoy sitting in. And I think that's the most obvious differential between people that naturally love horror experiences, media, and people that don't.
Yeah, I personally love a crisis.
Oh, I love a crisis, but not a horror crisis. I normally relax in a crisis. Side note, someone was stabbed outside our apartment 2 weeks ago, just before Eric, and everyone was flapping. And the moment we're in a crisis, I said, right, okay, I would like you two to come and lift the person here, and you call the ambulance. Is anyone calling the police? Right, let's not bombard them. You do that. I need you to go and fetch your first aid box. I just click in. And I suppose sometimes it's like that in an escape room. We didn't know what the problem was. We knew someone was running around with a knife. So I said, we need to all get to safety. We're going to go into the apartment. We're going to lift it. We're going to close the door. Let's stay calm. Let's make sure we're all accounted for. It's just calm and relaxed. And it's useful for a medic to behave like that. And I do tend to find in a crisis that I can focus more clearly and articulate myself better and analyze what's important, what needs to happen. I think with horror, a lot of people find that some of the scariest things are the potential for horror, what might happen next. And that comes from our own minds. So maybe it says a lot about me, but there has never been an escape room that has been more scary than the things that my own head could conjure up. But before I'd played horror rooms, I suppose I assumed that they could be, and I didn't want to experience any of those things. And where other people get their adrenaline rush from the dopamine release of the flight, fight response and the shock and the spectacle, I tend to get that dopamine release from joy and excitement and thrill of adventure or whimsy.
I enjoy it both. I get you.
I think it makes a lot of sense because fear of the unknown is probably the biggest thing, right? The anticipation is like when you're creeping through a dark house, nothing's happened yet. That's the worst time, the dread, the mounting dread, as David calls it. And then it's almost like when the killer, the monster jumps out, there's almost a relief that anticipation is over. And so I think it's the fear of unknown. And for me, I was the same way. I was horror averse. I've been forced to go to so many because my friends all love horror. And now I find that I'm less scared of them because I've done it. And I know for the most part how the jump scares are going to work, how they're planning to scare you. And so the more you go, the more you know, and then the less it feels like it's unknown.
Exactly that. And I think it's a little like when someone has an allergy or a phobia, we try to desensitize them by constantly showing them a little of what they're afraid of. So I think some of the reason that I started to be able to appreciate horror games is because I played enough that the initial fear and trepidation that would stop me enjoying them at all wore away, a little like PG describes, and gave me the ability to start to actually appreciate what they were offering.
I'll mention one last thing for any of our listeners who are also horror adverse. There is an excellent article on Room Escape Artists that Heather Burns wrote about how I learned to love horror rooms, and I thought she had some really great tips on there. So I recommend checking that out as well.
And we'll put those into the show notes. You've mentioned teammates, and I know you play escape rooms with lots and lots of folks, but historically, you've had two teams, S2 and S squared. Talk to us about your teams.
S2 and S squared are officially the same. Sharon's sister wrote us an anniversary card and wrote S and the little squared sign. I hope you're having a fabulous day. And shortly after this, we needed a team name for escape rooms that we'd started playing. And so we wrote S squared. But leaderboards don't tend to have the little squared symbol. So many of them write S2. So although we were always S squared, Sera and Sharan, instead, a lot of people assumed it was S2 and they became interchangeable. We played the first 500 games or so as a pair because we didn't know anyone else. We didn't know anyone else that might want to play with us.
And you also played those first 500 games very quickly.
We did. I think that there's this analogy I often give that uses martial arts. I have 2 black belts in martial arts. It's all about how much you know and knowing how much you don't know.
This is the Dunning-Kruger effect.
The Dunning-Kruger effect, exactly.
Which is this relationship between competence and confidence. And the less competent you are, the quicker you get confident until you reach a point where you realize how much you don't know. And then your confidence plummets, even though your competence continues to increase. Then it takes a long time to actually become truly confident again.
Yes, exactly. And I think that there's this confidence level halfway through the belts before you get a black belt where you're perceived as better than all of the people starting out, and perhaps you're asked to help teach them, and your form is better and that competence is growing. But there's also a kind of arrogance that comes with it, generally speaking, and a desperation to be better and do more. And I think it's a kind of a little analogous to escape room enthusiasts. At the beginning, we were just playing for fun. And then, because particularly in the UK, they used to have reliance on leaderboards. And I think it would be disingenuous for anyone to pretend that it isn't exciting to be on the top of a leaderboard, particularly if there's two of you and you've beaten the fastest time, which was a team of 4 or 6, which used to happen quite a lot. And then that kind of grows and it all becomes about being fast and getting the fastest time, because I suppose that's the metric perhaps you're using to judge your ability.
Also, this is a game, and society has taught us that games are competitive, and there happens to be a metric, and that metric is time remaining.
Yes. And so you start to care about it, or we started to care about it because we were told that's what mattered. So for those first hundreds of games, we thought that was the metric that mattered. We didn't know anyone else. It wasn't about playing with other teammates. It was about having adventures. It was also about escapism from work and life. But that was the metric that we used for success. And then I think there comes a point where you've played so many, it doesn't matter anymore. And we started to open up our team and play with other people of varying ability. And it matters more about enjoying the experience as a group of friends. And we stopped caring about time. But I also think that as a pair, our only stipulation was to want to get out of the room. As a pair, you don't necessarily know how much is ahead of you, how much content is in the room, how many puzzles there are.
Very true.
And so there's this emphasis on we need to be working hard and pushing because I want to get out of the room. That's what I care about. I want to see all the story. I want to experience all the puzzles. So we turn on a mindset. And so we are infinitely faster as a pair than we are as a 3 or 4 or 5 because we don't know how much content there is and we have an urgency about wanting to make sure that we get through it all. As our teams of 3s or 4s, our common teams, there is, I don't want to sound arrogant, but there's no concern we're not going to get out because games are made for the general public, and as a group of people that appreciate and enjoy puzzling and are relatively adept at it, we're not going to get out of the room. We are going to succeed. And therefore, we sit back a bit and we're playing so many in a day anyway that it's not about records, it's not about time. But it's interesting that we meet many owners who say, please slow down, don't try and rush, don't burn through the room, just enjoy it. And it's funny that they still say that. And I think, don't worry, for the last 2,500 games, I haven't cared about time. It's still fun when you've had a good time and you haven't been thinking about time to be told, oh, and you happened to be the fastest time. But for us, that's normally an indication that the flow was wonderful, that we were enjoying it so much that it just rolled and barreled into this frantic, excitable experience that happened to go quickly.
Sarah, what is your current play count?
It's about 2,900 and after this weekend, 57 or something like that.
You're coming up on your 3,000th escape.
We're coming up on it. So we played as a 2 a lot, to answer your question. S2 or S squared is myself and Sharan. And team squared is Dave and Mark. And then there are, I think a lot of people say, oh, we beat a team squared time, and that's your team. But we have a team that we've travelled with often called Squaggles. We have a mascot, it's a swan. And we were just with team safety potatoes. We have a mascot, it's a potato with a crash helmet, and we have Crimping Ain't Easy, which is my best friend and the 2 of us. So there are lots of teams, and I really enjoy the opportunity to get to experience adventures with the tribe that we've created. And when one person can't make it, someone else comes in.
Changing subjects just a little bit, you and Sharan are the originators of Escape, the escape room community tradition of enjoying cake to celebrate milestone escape rooms, like 100, 200, etc. What's the story behind the tradition?
I'm so glad you asked. I love the tradition. I'm still flabbergasted when I find out that people are presenting each other with a skate around the world.
We use it at every single event that we host.
Incredible.
Every single escape room tour, we have a skate.
And most people don't know that we're the originators of Escape. They just assume, I don't know, that it came into being.
We always credit you.
Ah, thank you. On our 150th room, we went to Scotland to play, I think it was the Secret Lab locked in Edinburgh, LIE. And we met an enthusiast, was very kind in helping us plan the trip. Jackie ran or still runs Exit Games Scotland. And she was excited that we were visiting there and wanted to come and say hello. And so she came to Lockton, Edinburgh, and knew it was our 150th game. We said we want to do something fun for our 150th. She presented us with a cake, and it was a dog cake. And she'd got 150 candles that represented 150. And I just coined it. I said, an escape. It seemed obvious at the time. And we just really liked the idea of whimsically celebrating something so meaningless, the most meaningless milestone that we've ever had in our life. It was just fun. It was tongue in cheek. But what we particularly liked is doing the same for our friends. So we didn't get our first escape until game 150, but we presented Ken Ferguson with his, I think, 100th, and friends with their 100th, and we just enjoyed sharing the joy. So we still do it. We gave Dave his 1,000th earlier this year, and some friends their 750th a number of weeks ago. And it was just a nice way to recognize that we're completing milestones that no one else in the world would care about, that are silly and frivolous, and sometimes shocking and surprising, but it's an acknowledgement to friends that they've achieved something either profoundly embarrassing or quite exciting. It was never, ever asking a company to present a cake. It was always a teammate to another teammate.
Yeah, we've never asked a company for a cake.
No, unfortunately, some people have, and I've had some companies who've been really upset with the idea because I wonder whether some enthusiasts assumed that this was a thing that happened in the industry. So I've heard of enthusiasts calling up companies saying, hi, it's going to be our 100th room or 200th room. Can you get us an escape? And the company have said, I don't know what that is. And you're booking a room with us. Why are we presenting,
Yeah. I know some owners who do choose to do this, but it's their choice, not a thing that is being asked of.
Yes. So it was always for us, teammates to celebrate a ridiculous milestone. But also, people will be surprised that Sharan and I have not had many escapes. We've presented a lot.
We're taking a moment to thank our sponsor, Morty. Morty is a free app for discovering, booking, tracking, and reviewing escape rooms, haunts, and other immersive social outings. Morty is available for all to use on its fantastic website experience, iPhone and Android apps. I believe in Morty so much that I have a stake in it as an advisor.
So, David, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Morty means to the escape room community and why we should be supporting them either as players or owners.
So there's a lot of reasons that I personally like to support Morty. The easiest one is just that it makes it easy for me to find games. It used to be so hard. But beyond that, I also have gotten to know Andy, founder of Morty, real well over the years, and also most of the team there. It's not a big team. It's only a few developers, a couple of product people. It's not a large team, but they are really engaged with the community. They're out there supporting shows like ours, and they're showing up at community events. They're setting up escape room meetups and empowering local communities all over the place. I really appreciate that kind of thing. And I think that it's really valuable to have a system that so many of us can come back to and report what we found and have a fair, straightforward place to go and share and surface that information.
Yeah, I appreciate that they're really looking to build features that enthusiasts want. Like every time I have used any of the new features they've rolled out, and he has messaged me specifically to ask, what did I like about it? What didn't I like? What can they improve on? So I appreciate that they actually listen to us and what we want.
The last thing I'll say on this is that I really think that as much as they are paying attention to the needs of players, they're also doing the same thing for owners. They're constantly rounding out their toolkit and their policies and trying to figure out how to strike that balance between helping players find games and helping owners support and manage their businesses. It's a tightrope act, and it's one that I think they walk really well. You can learn more at morty.app/repod. That's REPOD to sign up and get a special badge for our listeners. Link and details in the show notes. You're one of the 10 people on the board of the Top Escape Rooms project, founded by past REPOD guest Rich Bragg. On the board, we collectively have had a lot of debates over the years. Through it all, I've always found your perspective distinctive and valuable, but I've never actually asked you what it is you are striving for as a board member. Help me understand that.
I really appreciate that observation. Sometimes I feel like I'm the one causing trouble.
Me too.
Yeah, I think yourself, myself, and Dan Egnor, the dissenting voices, sometimes collectively.
Or sometimes at odds.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes at odds. I think without dropping immediately down into neurodiversity and escape rooms, which is like a whole subject, I have always found injustice really difficult to bear. And I always strive as much as I can for absolute fairness. Now, obviously, in some respects, the meter of that is subjective. But when someone says the top escape room award, my motivation is, great, let's find the top escape room. Let's turn over every stone there is to find the best escape rooms or any game that is worthy of recognition. It shouldn't be a popularity contest. It shouldn't be about, footfall, where most people are able to go to. It shouldn't be about finances. Just show me the best, most creative, wonderful, imaginative pieces of art. And normally when I have a dissenting voice or when I disagree, it's because I don't want anyone to be left out. That's not to say that I appreciate the onerous task of ranking 300 rooms, but I would rather have to rank too many rooms to ensure that one room in a country that hasn't yet had much footfall or that not many enthusiasts have managed to visit get a little recognition that is deserving because their room is subjectively better than half of the games on the list, than them to be left off. There's one game in particular that I felt was probably ready to win with their game 3 years before it did. And that was primarily because of footfall and because their region had fewer enthusiasts. And so it didn't reach the nomination threshold.
You can shout the game out if you want.
It was a Birth Machine.
At Mad Machines in Milan, Italy.
Yeah, so it eventually won. But that was the same game that was available 3 years ago. And I remember using it in an argument saying, this game is out there. And if we increase the nomination threshold, it will fall off. And it's deserving of an award. And I found that difficult. There are other debates that we've had. And almost always my motivation is just fairness. And the desperation to want anyone that deserves recognition to have recognition. Occasionally games will be on the bottom of that voting list that I wouldn't have placed there. And so I can understand the argument. We've got so many, and arguably the bottom of the pool aren't meeting the same quality at the top, and I agree with that. But at the same time, there are games that otherwise wouldn't get into the pool that might be halfway up.
Let me just clarify a little bit for anybody who doesn't know. TERPECA is the Top Escape Rooms project, and they rank the games. The board of advisors help set down and format the rules around how games win and how they're nominated, right? I just want to give a little context.
Yeah, we are helping Rich Bragg, who we have an extensive interview with him back a few seasons ago. This is his project. He owns it. He makes final decisions are all Rich. And that's not me passing the buck. That is me having reverence for what he does. There are a group of us from a number of different countries. We've all played a frankly silly number of games and have been plugged into our respective communities for a long time. We help with a lot of different tasks, including vetting and making sure that all of the data that is coming in looks correct, helping spot bad behavior, bad actors. And then we also help with setting what the rules are for any given year, adjusting based off of problems that we had from past years. And then when inevitably issues arise, especially during nomination and voting, we are there to help present different ideas and cases to Rich about how he can handle these things.
Right. And advocate for certain things like a game that doesn't meet certain thresholds to be nominated, like Birth Machine.
It's less that. We're doing this more at a policy level. So Birth Machine becomes an example. And in this case, to break this down a little bit further, for those who want to get real nerdy about this, It's a question of what is the nomination threshold with which things are allowed. And it's not, oh, we'll make this one exception for this one game. It's this is where the threshold is for this year. Anything that's above the line is in, anything that's below the line, better luck next year. We're not making exceptions, and we're not maneuvering to tweak and tinker with the list or anything like that. It's really about figuring out what's the right number of games to be nominated, how much is too much, at what point are we inflating the number of nominees that it starts to devalue the concept, at what point are there too many games in the system that too many people have to vote for and it starts to become onerous. And there are a lot of different things you can optimize for. There is no purely right way to do this. I think Sera has often been the voice arguing for fairness and, from my perspective, kind of a purity of the list itself. I don't want to put words in Dan Egnor's mouth, but I always see him as this other pillar, and I see him as arguing for fairness for the people involved. And I tend to be arguing for trying to make a system that is sustainable, that isn't going to break the people involved, because it's already very complicated.
I'll mention one last thing on this subject is that if you have played over 100 escape rooms, I strongly encourage you to go vote, because the more experienced players we have voting in this, the better it works, and your opinion does count.
If you've played over 200 games, get yourself on the list for next year if you're not already. That's the threshold we currently have to nominate 10 games. If you've played over 100 games, you can then vote on any of those games that have met that nomination threshold. You go through the process of ticking which of the games that have made it you've played, and then you rank those against each other.
And voting will be closed by the time this episode comes out this year, but put your name in, apply. Honestly, it's better for us if you apply off season anyway. It's a lot of work for us to administer this thing. And when I say us, I mean there's a small army of regional ambassadors from all over the world who are helping to maintain this system. So it's a lot of people involved. But yeah, get your name in there and vote. It really does help us. Every single person adding their knowledge and experience and data to the system is helpful.
I think further to your question, everything that I've done within the community, so I run the ERIC, which is the UK Escape Room Industry Conference, although we often have speakers from mainland Europe, and we have occasionally had speakers from America and Canada. We ran it consecutively for 3 years before COVID, and then COVID happened, and for other reasons we took a hiatus. But I've always wanted to give back to an industry that I've taken so much joy from, that has allowed me to escape the difficulties of the world, that has allowed me to have and experience incredible journeys with friends and strangers, that has formed such a large part of the way in which I enjoy myself, relax, form bonds and connections. And I've always wanted to give something back in return, not only through helping owners and designers refine rooms and promoting them and talking about them, but also in honoring them, in helping them promote themselves, in expanding the industry. And there are a number of ways that I have tried to do that, one of which is the conference, and another of which I think is serving on the board as an advisor. It's about honoring the industry. The more people that are involved, the more nominators and voters we have, the more the industry expands. Often the escape room industry is still slightly shunned by other industries that were formed some time ago. And I think it deserves to be recognized now, and having conferences and awards and recognition and communities where we come together and promote and celebrate are good for the industry. And it's deserving of that. And it's needed in these kind of growing industries. My fundamental wish whenever I'm involved in any of these things is just to help promote designers, creators, games, and communities. And whenever I'm in a kind of divisive argument on the board, everyone on the board wants the best for the TERPECAs. We just have different opinions about it. And I think we all want to promote our community. But for me, as you say, purity of the list is probably really fair.
Just hearing you describe your kind of motivations behind ERIC and also TERPECA involvement, that's very much the same for me. I mean, no one running conventions or escape room awards are getting rich off of this. This is a passion project. This is a thing you do because you love the medium and the people, and you believe in the medium and the people. And I'm glad that there are other people who are coming at this from different perspectives, but with those same goals. And that's something that I've always valued about you and also about everyone involved in the running and operation of TERPECA.
Do you want to integrate tech into your game but don't really know where to start? Are you looking to take your experience to the next level with theatrical lighting and sound cues? Cogs by Clockwork Dog is an easy-to-use platform that will automate your escape room and immersive events. Their plug-and-play hardware works seamlessly with their software, so you can create a game with high-tech puzzles that will reliably trigger, complete with sound and lighting effects. Whether you're an absolute beginner or a seasoned pro, Cogs has a solution for you.
Cogs has an outstanding support system dedicated to getting your show up and running and keeping it that way. Their team is ready to answer your questions via email or over their Discord server. On their website, you can watch tutorials, explore the knowledge base, or join that very Discord, which is such a valuable resource because it boasts a community of over 400 users who are continuously experimenting with Cogs, figuring out how to push its limits, and help grow that ecosystem. It's a fantastic place to get support. Ask, how do you do that? Receive news and updates, share tips and tricks, and connect with other escape room users about building games. Join the community today with the invite link at cogs.show. When you have a community behind you, you're never going at it alone.
REPOD listeners get 50% off the Cogs starter set, plus free shipping to the US. Use code REPOD at checkout. That's REPOD. For any questions about using Cogs or integrating tech into your escape rooms, make sure to join the vibrant community of creators on their Discord server. Learn more and start designing your game using their free tutorial by visiting cogs.show. Link and details in the show notes. You've also made the transition from being a player to now also being a game design consultant. So how did that come about?
When I was a teenager, over here, the education system looks different to everywhere else. And you do your exams, and then you decide what you want to do at university. And depending on your grades, you apply to that course. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I've always appreciated learning, but I've always been excited about all of the different things that I could learn. And the idea of pinning my flag into a singular subject matter was insane to me. And for various reasons, I also didn't do the exams that one would need to pursue medicine, which had always been a dream. So I thought, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to work instead. And I started my life as a tester for computer games at IDOS. It was 250 guys and me. Quite soon after I joined, it was a large open plan room, but at the start we were in kind of small pockets. And ultimately I was playing computer games. Learned about game design through computer games. I had some designing and production credits for computer games, so I think I understood the fundamentals of game design from a video game, a computer game world. And I think that lots of them are transferable. And so as I started to play escape rooms, it was impossible not to analyze the gameplay. What did we love and why? What did we not like and why? And then more importantly, how would we make that better? And as a team and the kind of people that we play games with, we discuss that. Oh, it was great until this point. Or that didn't make sense to us, but why? How could we have improved that? And a lot of the times my conversations or my ideas stemmed from the fundamental game design that I'd learned in computer games, as well as the analysis of board games and computer games that I had all my life. Because I started playing at the beginning of this industry, there are lots of escape room owners who were making games, but they don't have design credentials. They had no idea or knowledge of game design theory. They were learning as they were doing. They were experimenting on players. And often we would talk after the games and they would ask for feedback. And they'd start to make those changes to their rooms and found that people enjoyed them more. And it built slowly from that, so that I had local games or games in the UK owners that I'd met who had a free escape UX consultancy after a game. And I then used to offer us to play games for free if I would sit with them afterwards and give my thoughts on what could be improved and how they could make their game better. And I did that a lot. I must have given hundreds of hours of free kind of consultation.
The dream. Playing free games and I get to give my opinion. This is the best.
But it was always based on the fundamentals of game design. I tried to make it achievable. Here are 3 things I think you could change about your game. And here are the reasons why. I'd give them the theory behind it. Why aren't people having fun at this point? Most people are observers and only one person is doing, or because your ending can be missed by other parts of the team, or because your onboarding takes so long. I explained why. It wasn't, here's my opinion, I didn't like it. Sometimes I didn't like a game, but I could recognize that other people would, and perhaps that didn't need fixing. It was, here are some sticking points. Signposting is missing here. How do you expect us to know to do this? After this, there's no signposting. So I'd explain what I thought the issue was, why I thought it was an issue, and how it could be fixed. And we'd talk about that. And eventually that led to people asking us to come back. And then owners would offer effectively a consultation fee. Would you come and travel up and spend a bit of time? The other facet of my transition from player to design consultant basically fell in line with my pursuit of a medical degree and my general interest in neuroscience and psychology. As I said, I worked in the video game industry for a while, and I've always wondered why humans play, what makes them enjoy games, and how to heighten that. And so every time I consult, I try to use neuroscience and psychology principles to enhance that player engagement, whether that's looking at how to leverage the dopamine reward system, making sure there's a constant sense of discovery and achievement, and perhaps forcing those dopamine hits to push the excitement and motivation for players, to focusing on cognitive load and how that interacts with flow, making sure that puzzles and the games are challenging but not overwhelming, that they're well balanced, and that there's a wide variety of puzzle modality to ensure that all of the players feel invested and engaged at some point. The aim is to take a game that's probably good, solid game, but make small tweaks using these principles to create an even better experience. And that's something I'm really passionate about.
Has there been a design project that stands out to you as particularly memorable or a favorite?
Yes, I started more recently working as a lead designer for Midnight Madness. For people that don't know, Midnight Madness is a bespoke event where companies have to pay a rather large amount to put a team forward. It runs between roughly 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. the next morning, and it's a competition. And what they will expect, although it slightly changes every year, is that teams will go around a number of zones located around the city, and it runs in different forms in both London and New York, I believe. And each of those zones is somewhere between an immersive experience, a puzzle hunt, and an escape room. And not only have I been honoured to be a part of that, because we raise money for charity. So the first year I was involved, they raised over £500,000 for a charity, and a charity that then decides where the money should go to a lot of smaller children's charities. This year we raised over £750,000 for this charity. And the first year that I did it, the theme was dreams. And a lot of people took that very literally. What kind of dreams can I make my zone about? Scary, haunting dreams or stress dreams. And I always like to twist the topic on its head, and I've done that both years. And I said, well, what about where dreams come from or where they're made? And in collaboration with Arlo Howard, we came up with this idea that how do you make dreams? Maybe dreams are created, and what we'd get is for our teams to come in and be onboarded as workers at this dream-making corporation company. And as part of that, I created a big dream machine. I always wanted to make a giant version of, perhaps you've both experienced the puzzle, where you might put a couple of elements into a machine and then magically those elements will combine into something and create something else. So maybe you need a blue key and you put a plain key and a pot of blue paint into a machine, and then you've got your blue key. And I created a giant version of this, to the point that we had 180 small transparent cubes, each with a little element inside it. And then we created these giant flowcharts of dreams. The players would be told, you need a narwhal. And they started with 3 elements that were nothing to do with a narwhal. And ultimately, they could both combine items and divide items into this machine. And the people behind the machine would be working it so that if they were given an ice cream cone and a dolphin, they would receive a narwhal. And the best bit about it was the joy that I could hear from the teams the other side as they got to experiment with the items. You could hear them talking about it and analyzing what they think they might need. Okay, we've got an ice cream cone. Probably we're going to need some kind of water-based mammal. And so you could hear it wasn't just guesswork. Let's put this all in and see what we could get. They were trying to work through the logic, and it worked really well in the end. I saw the winning team this year, and they said that's still the favorite puzzle from all the Midnight Manases they've ever done.
That's wonderful.
A little joy machine.
Exactly, the joy machine, but accidentally also creating this interactive element that meant that they could play even beyond the confines of the original puzzle that I designed, is that so many of the teams stayed by the machine to keep playing and keep interacting because they found it so much fun. And that taught me a lot about the potential for design as well. So that's probably one of my most memorable designs.
Sera, what are your long-term hopes and dreams for the escape room world?
I think I hope that the escape room industry gets a wider recognition from other industries about the quality of what it offers, of the entertainment that it offers, a greater appreciation for the incredible creations that are made, and that it becomes a regular part of a response when people say, what do you want to do? And by that, what we normally mean when it's, I have spare time, what do you want to do, is what fun would you like to have? What type of play would you like to take part in now? And throughout history, play has been fundamental. I think it's a quote by Salman Rushdie who said that humans are the only species that use play to learn how to communicate and learn the confines of society and learn how to interact with each other. And so are stories. When a baby is born, it asks for kind of food and comfort. And then the third thing is tell me a story. And play, there are instances of play throughout history. I think the first ever thing sold in a box was a board game, and there are board games shown on Egyptian pyramids. Humans play, and escape rooms for me are one of the best ways that adults can play. I think adults don't appreciate how important it is for them to keep playing. And there's a lot of psychology behind that. But I remember being younger and video games were looked down upon by generations that weren't used to it. This is a waste of time and it's frivolous and it's silly and it doesn't teach us anything or do anything for us. And now they're more widely accepted. And I hope for the escape room industry that it goes the same way because, as I say, I think even more than the impact of video games had on me, being able to adventure with friends, to continue to push narrative and explore worlds and ideas and feelings in a safe space is fundamentally important. I hope it continues to grow, and I hope that it continues to expand beyond, I think, the confines that we've placed on it. Escape rooms are so much more than a room with locks and boxes or a room with technology where you place things. That's starting to happen, but I just hope that the creators behind the creations just continue to push boundaries and that we all appreciate that.
We couldn't agree more, and that's part of our mission here as well.
Sera, is there anything that you hope to see change in the escape room world?
I feel really passionate about content warnings. I understand the word trigger warning can be a bit divisive, so perhaps content warning or distressing content warning might be more accepted. But I think it's really important because far too often I've played games with seemingly benign narrative only to find that they've unexpectedly veered into something deeply unsettling. Yes, there are plenty of games that are unsettling on the face of them. You read the blurb and it will say that it might be about a serial killer or a psychopath or a possessed child or a demented nun, but at least I can read that blurb and decide whether that's something or not I want to explore and engage in. But what has happened more recently, and I think more often, and I find it quite shocking, is that sometimes a narrative will shift and twist into something deeply unsettling without any explicit warning. And players, including myself, have been left entirely unprepared for that content. And in some of these rooms, particularly the horror ones, but not always, players are stuck as passive observers to a scene. So some actors are playing out this change, this twist, or this distressing scene, and it leaves players in a difficult position of deciding whether they need to leave the game in the middle of it and seek support. And I think we need to remember that as an industry, the product we make, unlike other forms of passive entertainment often place players in a protagonist role or a very active role, and that heightens the visceral nature of these experiences. And whilst I'm not necessarily advocating for a formal rating system akin to those we have for, video games and films, I do think it's vital for us in the industry to prioritize the mental and emotional well-being of our players and customers as much as we try to ensure physical safety. I have heard from a number of players who have come out of a game feeling practically traumatized by being unexpectedly placed in the middle of a story that they would not have otherwise chose to engage with. And as an industry, I think we need to take more responsibility for that.
This is an interesting problem that I broadly agree with you. And at the same time, from an American perspective, this is not something that we readily deal with here. In fact, we don't really deal with this in the United States. This is something that we see when we travel to certain cities in Europe, particularly, I think, Athens, Greece, is where I keep hearing about this the most. I do think that there are issues that arise when a community continues to push into deeper and deeper forms of the extreme, because at some point that will reach a breaking point every time. Sera, I'm going to ask you a question. It may be the most personal question I've ever asked anybody on this show in 8 seasons, but can you tell me about Sister Act?
Oh, I can. What is the narrative starting point of Sister Act? There are 2 foundations for this story. One is that when I was working with the wonderful Simon Edwards, who I've been working with on Midnight Madness and a number of other experiences and designs, a couple of years ago, we got onto the subject of favorite movies. And Simon said to me, "What's your favorite movie?" And I said, "I'm never going to tell you because it's really embarrassing. So let's say it's," and I'm not sure what the example I gave, but I'm sure it was something I perceived as being really cool. And eventually he kept prodding until I said, "Okay, it's Sister Act. My favorite movie is Sister Act." And it's because it's just joyous. It's just happy. It's frivolous and it's wonderful and it makes me smile. I rented it from Blockbuster when I was a kid, and I kept asking my parents to rent it again the next week and the next week. And I watched it so many times. My favorite ever Christmas present was my parents presenting me with my own VHS of Sister Act. I hadn't even thought that was possible. I could own it myself. And I used to watch it repeatedly. And as someone who likes new experiences constantly and never likes doing the same thing twice, it says a lot when I want to rewatch. And it became like a crux throughout my life. If I had a hard day, Sister Act. If I was sick, my mum would put on Sister Act for me. Even now, if I'm not well, Sharon's like, "Right, Sister Act's going on." So that's one of the fundamentals behind the story. And he knew, and he said, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to have a Sister Act escape room?" I said, "It would be amazing." He said, "It would be your 2 worlds combining." I'm like, "Yes, that would be incredible." I said, "I think it would be a little bit niche." And the other fundamental part of this story is that just over 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Just over 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I've had cancer for a few years, and we didn't think that it would ever spread. There was no signs of it spreading, and it was a great shock. And my friends have been incredible, and we are making memories, and we hope that we have lots more time to make memories. A lot of those memories are escape rooms because that's how we've been making memories in our life. A few weeks ago, my best friend said to me, "Sera, I've got a friend of a friend who's making a pop-up escape room. They need people to come and test it and give feedback." And this is common for us. This happens all the time. And it didn't ring any alarm bells. I thought, yeah, no, of course. Last Monday, we turned up at 7 p.m. at this little cute boutique hotel in London. And there was my best friend. And he said, "Right, everyone go to the toilet and get ready, and I'm just going to send them a message and we'll start." Again, not out of the ordinary at all. And then he looked at his phone and he said, "Okay, I've let them know that we're about to start. Actually, I might go to the toilet." And off he went. And then I turned to Sharon and I said, "That's odd. This is my friend Treble. He wouldn't tell them to start and then go to the toilet." But again, I didn't think anything strange. So I just thought it was strange. And I thought, oh, how funny. He must be involved in this in some way and he hasn't told us. And then 30 seconds later, our friend Dave, part of Team Squared, walked in. Dave lives in a city 2 hours away. And this was a Monday night on a work day, and he walked in and we said, Dave, what are you doing here? And he was playing with a lock on a box, but we hadn't clicked. And he said, don't touch the actor, don't touch the actor. And it was taking a little while for this to sink in. And I thought, oh, how funny, how sweet. Treblers invited Dave to come along and play with us because we all just went to America together. What a lovely surprise. And Dave started playing with the lock, and it was an in-joke to our team. And as he opened the lock, another friend, David Middleton, a dear friend who runs Eric the Conference with me, burst in a police outfit and said, Cornelius Nips. Cornelius Nips is Davis's alter ego. I'm sorry to all the American rims out there that have a waiver signed by Cornelius Nips. Dave won't sign a waiver properly, and one of his alter egos is Cornelius Nips. So the amount of GMs who have said, Sarah, Sharon, Mark, and Cornelius, come to the room, and we all have a little giggle. That's why. Cornelius Nips, you're under arrest for crimes against puzzles. And I thought to myself, well, this is insane. 3 of my friends have turned up on a work night in the evening. Dave lives in Brighton, which again is hours from London. This is just wonderful. And I got a bit teary, but I thought Dave Middleton often runs these kind of off-the-wall events. He does a lot of kind of bespoke puzzle stuff, and clearly he's got in touch with Treble and Dave to come with us to play this. So he said, right, Cornelius Nips is on the loose. Dave ran out of the hotel. Don't worry, I'll catch him. But he's seen your face and you're in danger. So you must come with me. We need to hide you out. And for anyone that doesn't know the story of Sister Act, why not? Go and watch it. It's just joy. But also, something similar, but not in any way similar, happens to the protagonist, Dolores Bancati. She witnesses a violent crime and she has to be hid away. I'm still not clocking on. He walks us out of this boutique hotel down to the River Thames, just a 30-second walk. And there's this beautiful old church there. And he throws open the doors to it. And I'm thinking, what has he done? This is really strange. He throws open the metal gate. It's a really old church. It was built by Christopher Wren in 1782, I think. And then he throws open the church doors. And at the end of the hallway is my friend Zoe, dressed as Mother Superior. And I burst into tears because at that point I realised what this is. This is my friends, and they've made a Sister Act escape room for me. They've made my two worlds come together. They've all come together to do something just for me, just for joy. And Zoe has apparently sat, I learned this afterwards, and learned all the lines of Sister Act. And so she's telling us, there's a little scene where I think it's Sergeant Barry Wilder, the character, the policeman, says, you've got to hide them out in your convent. You know, we need help. You've got to keep them safe. And Zoe comes back with lines from the movie, which I find so gleeful. I'm crying and giggling at the same time. And the night unfolds of the first puzzle it's a bespoke puzzle of the 10 puzzle compartments. It's a big plaque of the 10 commandments, but written in puzzle format. You know, thou shalt never hack a padlock. Thou shalt never look at a red herring. Thou shalt not fix things from the wall. And then we had pictures of the nun doing some of those naughty things, and it ultimately opened a lock with habits, and we put on our habits, and we were new sisters to the sisterhood of puzzles of this church. They then throw open the doors to the main chamber of the church, which was beautiful. It was nighttime, it was lit up, and throughout the night when we solved puzzles we were sent off to different areas, and a new friend would turn up. We went outside to meet the gardener, and it was Zoe's husband Mike, and we travel with them all the time as a team. And then we went back in and we solved, and each puzzle I realized was clearly written by a friend of mine, one of the designers or owners or friends that we know, or it was an Easter egg to something that had happened in our life or in our friendship with someone. And at one point, one of the boxes we were given had the dome symbol on it. And for anyone that doesn't know, the dome was my number one favorite game for a very long time. And I thought, oh, that's lovely. They know how important that game was for me. And I get on with the owner, Eric, incredibly well. By complete coincidence, he calls me Sister Sarah and I call him Brother Eric. And I thought that's so lovely that they brought that into it just to mark it, because obviously he's over in the Netherlands. And then a friend who we hadn't seen for over a year and a half, who lives in Manchester, who's very dear to us as part of the original Team Squared, burst through the door to ask for some, and they all stayed in character to ask for some help with the date and ask the Mother Superior. And there we were fixing this, and I could barely see for most of the evening because I was pulling tears from my eyes. There were so many, but happy tears. And we solved some more puzzles. And then a chap who I didn't recognize came in, and he introduced himself as the pianist for the choir. And he said, the service can't go ahead on Sunday without the choir music. And so we continued to do some more puzzles with the ultimate goal, which I thought was very sweet, of getting the choir music for him so they could perform the service. One of the puzzles, which was bespoke, and I couldn't believe it, was this dome puzzle that, when we got pieces right, shone projections onto the ceiling and the walls of this church that were symbols that meant something to me and my friends, which was beautiful. Others had us going up to the pulpit and looking down, and they'd created a number out of the seat covers. We had ones with candles and donation boxes. They were all little poignant nods to either Sister Act or to my friendship. We finally got into the last room, and there was a book on the table. It was very clear that the music was hidden in the safe. One of the numbers that we had to get, it was a lovely little logic puzzle about Father Maurice and his favourite nun, or this choice of nun. And there was a book of the Sisters of St. James. And as I opened it, I saw 25 faces in it, 2 on each page. And as you all know, David, because David and Lisa were 2 of those faces, that friends from around the world that couldn't be there on the night, and some of those that could, had sent in their picture of their face and their hands in different positions. And then a lovely woman called Matilda had put a habit over all of them. And
we were all nunnified.
You were all nunnified with you. And they all said sister. I can't remember. It was sister when it was a male person. They'd been given a kind of sisterly name. It was very sweet. But Sister Lisa and Sister David were there, and Sister Rich and Sister Kiki from the TERPECAs, and great friends and wonderful people. All the TERPECA board were there. And so Father Maurice might say, I'm looking for a nun that has circular glasses, and I'm looking for a nun that has no facial hair. And so we'd be crossing off. But it took so long, longer than they planned. I think they tested it, and when we were a little bit slow, partly because of the overwhelm and partly because I was dragging tears. I couldn't read the letter for crying, but crying with happiness. I couldn't believe that people had done this for me, and that people from around the world that couldn't be there had just even given a little bit of their time to send something. And every page we turned was a new set of faces from friends from the community. And eventually we cracked the codes and got the sheet music, and the Mother Superior, who was still there doing a wonderful job, and Simon, who was playing the janitor, who was the mastermind behind all of this, had said, you're not allowed to run in a church, but when you get the sheet music, we'll allow you to run once. So we ran the sheet music to the pianist, and I thought that was a lovely ending. And I turned to Simon and I said, this is the best thing. And as I was trying to finish my sentence, the pianist said, well, you can't have sheet music and not play a song. And I burst into tears. I thought, we're going to sing a song from Sister Act together. That's really delightful with my friends. And I said, oh, yes, that would be. And as I tried to finish that sentence, he said, and for that, we need a choir. And the doors swung open to the church, and a choir of nuns appeared and walked in up to the stage of the church, and there was a Dolores Van Cartier there, and who was the choir mistress. And there was one final puzzle, which is a little take from Sister Act, which is that when Sister Mary Clarence, Dolores Van Cartier, first goes to the choir, she helps align them into sopranos and altos. And so she said, before we sing, could you please help us align the choir? And so they'd each learn a word or 2 words from a phrase from one of the famous songs. And I had to get each one of them to sing and then put them in order. And then when they were there, I said, sisters, and they sang in order, and it was right. And that started off the song. And they sung to me one of the famous songs from Sister Act, and then another. And as they were singing, all of the friends that had been part of this came into the back of the church, into the pews, and sang along with us. And when I turned around, at one point, Eric had flown in from the Netherlands and appeared as well at the back. And it was just joyous and wonderful. And what I didn't realize was that I said to them, I can't believe you've all been here on an evening. Zoe and Mike are teachers, and you live far away. You normally go to bed by now. And Mark, you live in Manchester, and Dave, you live in... And they said, no, but don't you realise we've been doing this? We've been planning this for 8 weeks. We've been having Discord calls and testing sessions and reaching out. And I suddenly thought, of course they have. You can't make this in 2 hours. This is incredible. But also I was so overwhelmed that anyone would think I was worthy of of them doing that. Zoe said, I've watched the movie about 5 times and learnt the lines, and we had a 3-hour call on Sunday. And
worth it for that alone. You
Right?
You made them watch the movie.
oh, they'd all watched it. I have brought joy to so many lives. It's really on me, and they should be grateful. And then the choir, I said to the choir, who I didn't know, I can't believe you're doing this for me. And they said, we've been in this church for a month practicing every week just to sing for you. And what I take away from it is I have never felt so loved in my entire life. As an autistic person, I have often struggled with the concept of friends and making friends and keeping friends. And escape rooms mean to me friendship and community. I found a tribe, and I found people that understood me, and I found acceptance and love and friendship and fun. And the epitome of that is that in my hour of need, this community that I have found through playing escape rooms and traversing the world and meeting people and sharing experiences with people, they came together for me in the most incredible way. And I have never felt so held by a community, not just now, but before this. I remember saying to Rich Bragg when we visited him, and he said, why do you play so many games? And I said, because I found people that are like me, that can abide me, despite my idiosyncrasies, despite my quirks, that I can have fun with, that I can call friends. And I turned around to all of these friends in the church, and I thought, I've done it. I've made friends, and I've kept friends, and I've lived and experienced joy with friends. And they've returned that, and I'll never be able to thank them enough, but they have given me so much joy. And every day I think about it, I feel joy. And Sister Act is joy. And escape rooms are joy. It's all fun and it's all play. And now more than ever, I realise how short life is and how important friendship and play and enjoyment is. And I think when one's faced with their own mortality, you spend a lot of time thinking, what is the point of life? And the best I've come up with is to be good, to do good, and to have good times with good people. And that's what escape rooms do for me. And I'm sorry, Eric of the Dome and Jonathan Driscoll of Circus Magnifico, but Sister Act is now my number one escape room. It's pretty bespoke, and I'm not sure many people will get to book it. And I'm sorry for that. It's not going to make the TERPECAs for that reason. But it was such a wonderful, poignant thing to experience at such a difficult time, but that has brought so much happiness and has summed up what the entire community and finding escape rooms is and was to me. It's finding my community and my happiness and my joy and the reason for being, which is probably a lot more profound than why other people play games, but there you have it. That was Sister at the Escape Room.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it's an incredible reminder to be grateful and to appreciate what we have today. And I think about that sometimes. Part of what I love about escape rooms is the community, the support. People with a collaborative soul are drawn to escape rooms and a sense of play. And that's definitely where I have found my people too. But it's a good reminder to appreciate that every day.
Sera, thank you for joining us. I have been simultaneously looking forward to and dreading this interview more than any that we've done this season, really ever. And over the years, I've really gotten to know you. And the thing that you always leave me feeling is this notion that courage isn't being never afraid. It's getting over your fears. And you, more than anyone I've ever met in my life, have been such an embodiment of that. You feel feelings so deeply, and you feel fear so strongly, and you fight through this stuff, and you've persevered, and you've experienced so much because you were willing to fight past that. And I've known about the struggles you've had for a long time, and I've had my own over the last few years. Looks like I'm going to be fine, but there was a long time where I didn't know that I was, and I didn't know that I even wanted to. And you're one of the people that I've just kept looking to and saying, she gets over this stuff. She fights this stuff. And you've been such an inspiration to me. And I will be forever thankful for that.
I'm so grateful for that. I'm so glad that we met each other. I'm so glad to be part of this community. I'm so honored by that. I've always had imposter syndrome. I've never felt really worthy of friends or accolades or kind comments, but the escape room community has helped me overcome that as well, and has helped me accept that kindness and that love and that generosity, and helped me return it without the concerns I used to have about that. And yeah, it's just, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to be here and to talk to you. I can't imagine anyone wanting to hear my story. It's such an odd thought that people would be interested, but I hope that if anyone takes anything from it, it's just to keep playing, keep being joyful, keep having fun. And I think this is one of the wonderful ways in which we can do it. Playing, exploring, making friends. And sometimes I think I've lived more of a lifetime in these years than maybe perhaps some people do in double the time that I'll have, because, gosh, I've saved the world hundreds of times. I should at least get thanks for that. I have created antidotes for viruses and broken into lots of tombs and diffused bombs. But that's another great thing about the escape room world. It's that safe space to be heroes and villains and protagonists and do things that we might not otherwise have the courage to do. And so when you talk about courage, that means a lot. It's given me that space to feel more courageous and keep going. And sometimes I hide within it, but I think that's okay.
This episode of Reality Escape Pod is produced by Teresa Piazza with support by Lisa Spira, Matthew Stein, Ken Ferguson, and Simon Edwards. We're edited by Steve Ewing of Stand Inside Media, music by Ryan Elder, logo by Janine Proct, and all of this is brought to you by RoomEscapeArtist.com, your home for well-researched, rational, and reasonably humorous escape room and immersive gaming content and events. Reality Escape Pod is mainly supported by Patreon backers. Creating these episodes takes a lot of time, care, and money. We're invested in creating a robust community of creators and enthusiasts, and we need your help. A lot of big content creators, they reach a point where their Patreon is so big that they don't know who is joining. I promise you, we are aware every single time someone backs us. We know who our long-term backers are. We send out handwritten letters, wax sealed by hand, to every single person who backs us on Patreon. We as a team celebrate every single person who joins because it means so much to us. The ongoing support that we get from our patrons is everything. It is so hard building a media business in this era, and we are only able to do it because of the continued support of so many wonderful people. And if you have not yet joined, I hope that you can consider it if it's something that you can afford. And for everybody who is supporting, we do provide a lot of extra content that we put a lot of love into. Every single episode has a bonus after show. In between seasons, we also make extra bonus content that only goes out to patrons. And we also have, for our higher level supporters, the Spoilers Club, where we dig deep into escape rooms and talk about everything that went into the making of them, the running of them, and the behind the scenes with the creators. Both shows are a labor of love, just like the one that you just listened to. To learn more, visit patreon.com/roomescapeartist. Link and details in the show notes. I would also like to thank our highest level Patreon supporters: Karen, Byron Delmonico, Mark from Keystone Escape Games, Paula Swan, Rex Miller, Chris Laughlin, Panic Room, Pat at Olivier Escape, Escaparium, Breakout Games, and Derek Tam. Thank you for your ongoing support. If you're looking for a way to support Reality Escape Pod that doesn't cost a dime, go on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a 5-star review. Bonus points if you say some kind words. We put so much love into every single episode, and it means the world when you tell other people that this show is worth listening to. There's a lot of podcasts out there, and social proof matters. Your words matter. They help us immensely.
When Team Squared were playing an escape room in Spain, and it was a space-based escape room, and it was non-linear, so we all split up and were doing various tasks, and Mark disappeared off into a room. We didn't think of anything of it because he was puzzling. And about 20 minutes later, we were all highly frustrated because in our individual spaces, we were getting absolutely nowhere. Eventually, we found a toolkit that we were supposed to use, and that inevitably helped me with my little puzzle that I was doing, and helped Dave and Sharan do their puzzles. Literally 20 or 25 minutes later, we found Mark, and he was just sitting down, and we thought, oh, bad sign, he's sitting. And we said, what are you doing? And he said, I found this block of ice and it needs to be melted because I can see that there's, a key or something critical underneath it. And we said, okay, where is the block of ice? And he said, I'm sitting on it. I couldn't find anything else to melt the block of ice with. I thought I would sit on it and try and use my own body heat. So he'd been sitting on a block of ice for 25 minutes, trying desperately, it was a large block of ice, to try and melt it through to a key, until such point that we said, oh, we did find this toolkit with a tiny hammer. So we saved him from what is now dubbed the space toilet, which he'd been sitting on for 25 minutes trying to melt through to a key with his posterior whilst we were all sitting on a tiny hammer.